I was asked to go and spend a day with a group of very competent managers of a big bank, in one of the UK's biggest banks. The background to this was one of the oldest and biggest banks has been losing market share, and therefore the chief executive felt that something had to be done. And what has to be done, probably because he's been to a business school or a conference or something, is you can't just change an organisation, we've come to realise. What you have to do, you can't just change people's behaviour. What you need to do first, from a particular way of thinking, is you need to change people's values. So OD programs tried in days gone by to directly change behaviour and found they couldn't. So the next thing was to say, well, people behave as they behave because of the values they believe in. So if we can change their values, the values in this place, then of course the behaviours will change and we'll have what we want. So the chief executive said that clearly this bank is a highly bureaucratic, old-fashioned organisation, and what we need is a new entrepreneurial organisation which moves rapidly and keeps adjusting to the markets and this kind of thing. And therefore, we need to find out what are the values which, if people held them and behaved according to them, would produce this kind of innovative, entrepreneurial kind of organisation. And I guess, because I didn't actually meet the chief executive, but I heard a lot about him, I guess he couldn't immediately think what these values would be. And furthermore, perhaps he couldn't immediately think, well, if you could identify these values, how would you get people to actually behave according to them? How would you get people to believe whatever these new values are? So he decided to appoint a task force, and we usually do that when we don't know what to do. And the task force consisted, I think, of 12 people, which is a significant number, of course. And they were picked from the ranks of high flyers. So these were people who the Human Relations or Resources Department has identified as people who were heading for top positions, the most competent younger group. So they were all in their early 30s, very well educated, very competent, ambitious people who were really going places. I think there were about 3 were women and the others were male. And they were told to clear their diaries for 1 day a week for the next 10 weeks. So the chief executive made clear this is very important. No excuses. You must meet once a week for the next 10 weeks, at the end of which I want a report specifying the new values and how they can be spread through the organisation. And I joined this group, I think it was in week 9, by which time they hadn't produced very much at all. And were feeling very frustrated and stuck. And the consultant who had been hired to facilitate their meetings thought they needed something different or whatever, so I was asked would I go and be something different. And I turned up to spend this day talking. And before I got there, they sent me some notes that one of them had prepared on what they'd been doing for these 8 weeks or whatever it was. And the number of things that struck me about these notes. First of all, it was clear they were using the kind of words or jargon that you would pick up in business schools and management development programs about values and various other kinds of things. And the other thing that struck me was nowhere had they specified what the new values would be. I didn't see anywhere in those notes which suggested what you might think that they were, or in fact what the old values were or are. There was a number of references to the chief executive who it was felt ought to have been participating with them, and a number of statements saying that he didn't live the values, which I found a bit surprising because they hadn't specified what the values were, so it was a bit hard to find out, well, what is it that this chief executive wasn't doing? And the only thing that they'd really come up with was a metaphor in which they likened these values to a virus. And they, you all know the virus. You know the virus. And they had said that if we think of values as a virus, then the way that they would spread through the organisation is like an infection. So if the organisation was somehow infected with these new viral values, then that's how they would spread. And the first person who should be infected has to be the chief executive. So if you are in my position and you're going down there to spend a day with these people, how would you be thinking about this? What would be striking you? What would you imagine you were walking into? Any thoughts? What struck you about what I've just been talking about? Anything?
Were they paid to say that?
They were paid a lot of money. They were very senior, quite senior management. Why do you think, why were they having this problem? Does it sound a reasonable thing to be doing?
I think they had a problem of ownership. So the people change values. You have to put all the people together and to have a sense of ownership, because you can just say, this is a value now, go on and change your values because of this one. I think it's one of the biggest problems. At least I wouldn't believe in it, so you couldn't sell it to me like this.
No, you couldn't tell anybody really, could you? I mean, surely we know that you can't go around telling people what to believe. You might be able to go and frighten people into doing what you tell them. There's no way that you're going to get them to actually believe what you want them to believe by instructing them. So it's, the question then is, why do we think we can sit down and define values? How are we thinking? Because the thing that strikes me is that all these people involved in doing this are highly competent people. The chief executive is a very successful person, very competent, very well educated. How on earth is he thinking when he just takes it for granted that it makes sense to ask 12 people to spend all this time specifying values? What do you think of this metaphor of a virus? What response does that develop when you hear me talking about a virus?
Virus is something that you don't want, so if it's a virus,
exactly,
it's a negative state.
Very negative, very negative. So here they are trying to do something positive, and what they come up with is a very, very negative
way to put it.
And what do you think when you hear they want to infect the chief executive? What would you imagine? Why would they say that, do you think?
He will be the first suffering. Have the pain.
Yeah. Why would you want him to have the pain?
It's easy. You can put the blame on someone.
Yeah.
It's easy.
So I think, for me, the importance of paying attention to these kinds of statements and then thinking about them and trying to think what's going on with these people that they would make such a statement, is that I am then arriving, not knowing what's going to happen, but I'm beginning to suspect that if people are talking like this and writing like this, they must be one angry bunch of people. So the question is, what are they angry about? It's a very aggressive, very, very aggressive, angry thing to want to infect people with the virus. And particularly your chief executive. So if he's the one you're wanting to infect, I would suspect that there's a lot of anger with this chief executive. Now, why would there be a lot of anger? Why would people be angry with the chief executive?
Maybe because he tried to promote something that is not natural.
Exactly. He's asked them to do something that's not possible. And if you take, and think what he's done, these people have been identified as the high flyers. Now that's very flattering on one level, to be told, look at you, but it's terribly frightening on another, because what are the expectations of you? It means you daren't make a mistake or fail, otherwise you won't be a high flyer anymore. And it's very dangerous to be in the high flyer group because of the envy of everybody else who's not. And we all know that to be envied is not very pleasant. It's very dangerous, because envy, when people are envious, when we're envious, I'm envious, envy means trying to spoil what another has that you would like to have. And since you can't have it, you try to spoil their having. So it's very dangerous to arouse other people's envy. Especially because envy is a kind of form of aggression that isn't direct and seen, it comes at you around the corners, kind of thing. So there's another example. Why is this group of people doing this particular exercise? They're wasting a lot of money. From the perspective that I would come at, what they're trying to do is impossible. They're wasting a lot of money, a lot of time, and they're becoming very frustrated in the process. How are they thinking, which leads them to behave in this particular way? And you can see some of the ways that they're thinking. They're thinking, and it's very common, that you have to change the whole before it's worthwhile doing it. Now, in the work with them that day, I listened to them for quite a long time, and then eventually began asking some questions like, making some suggestions, and I did suggest, it sounds like you're pretty angry. And at first there's denial. What do you mean? No, we're not angry. But then eventually somebody admits, yeah, I am angry because we're getting nowhere with this thing. And then I ask, what if it's impossible to do what you've been asked to do? And the immediate response is, of course it's possible. We've been told we have to do it. So, of course it's possible. But what if it's not? But then, as I listen to them talk and ask questions, what I begin to notice is they haven't just been meeting over the last 9 weeks on this 1 day a week. Smaller groupings of them, because they've come to meet in a large grouping, smaller groupings have been forming in between these meetings. And people are beginning to do things they didn't do before, like ask each other for assistance. So I'm in one department, and I've met these two at this meeting who are in other related departments. And now I've got contact with them, I'm inviting them to come and have discussions with me about the problems I'm facing, and they're doing the same with me. So what's beginning to happen on a very small scale is the very thing this chief executive is hoping would happen. Namely, that people are not going to be stuck in their departments and not talk across their departments. Things are beginning to happen, but nobody's noticing it. So when I start suggesting, well, let's hear more about this. What are you doing? And then I suggest, well, something is happening. This is change. You are living some kind of different value because you're now communicating with each other in a different way. Their tendency is to dismiss that as being of much importance. Why? Well, it's only us. It's only 2 or 3 of us here and 2 or 3 of us there. And that's what I mean about a way of thinking and a belief which says unless we can do something on a large scale, then it doesn't really count for very much. It's no good 3 or 4 of us here, 3 or 4 of us there, 3 or 4 of us over there, doing things a bit differently. All of us have got to do things differently all at the same time. In other words, people are thinking of their organisation and of themselves as some big interconnected system, and the whole system has got to change. So when we think about organisational change, we do it in this taken for granted way in which we believe that somebody, some group of people like these 12, must be outside this system and must be formulating the purpose, the values, the vision, whatever, for this system and applying it to that system. Now there's a whole way of thinking. It's a way of thinking in which we think that our organisations are systems and that the people in them are the parts of those systems. And that if you want to change, you have to change the whole thing in a designed way. You have to design the change in advance. So I'm telling you this as another practical example of what people are doing. Very competent people in a bank just a few months ago, because of the way they are thinking, and they take it for granted that it makes sense to try and do what they do. And in the process, they are not noticing what they are actually doing, which could, and in a way of thinking that I'll get on to talk about in a minute, which could have longer term, very profound consequences. So, in other words, I'm suggesting that maybe there's another way of thinking in which you don't think of an organisation and of ourselves as a system that has to be changed all at once, but you think of us and an organisation as interactions between people where changes can begin at a very small, insignificant looking level.